Stearic acid is one of the fatty acids. It's one of the forms of fatty acids, and it contains 18 carbon atoms. Now, the breakdown of the stearic acid gives off 146 ATP molecules. That's why I told you that fatty acid breakdown is very efficient in terms of energy breakdown or energy production. Okay? Okay. So you have here. Now, ketone bodies are formed principally in the liver mitochondria, can be used as fuel in most tissues and organs. So, itong ketone intermediate products out of the breakdown of fatty acids can be used as fuel in most tissues and organs. Formation occurs when the amount of acetyl-CoA kanusa mag-form ang ketone. When the amount of acetyl-CoA produced is excessive, kung daghan na, compared to the amount of oxaloacetate available to react with it and take it into the Krebs cycle ni siya. Tricarboxylic acid or Krebs cycle, receptic acid cycle. TCA. So in other words, intake is high for ketone bodies. Intake is high in lipids and low in carbohydrates. So when you take in more of these lipids, you can produce more of these ketone bodies. So as a result, diabetes is not controlled. Diabetes is not controlled. Kung nakay diabetes, then there will be cellular starvation. Ngayon naman. Anong mas-starve man yun? So, when you have more of these ketone bodies glass, of course, diabetes is not controlled. Okay, imagine mo, say, halimbawa, kay diabetes. Kung diabetic gani ka, depende type 1 or type 2. You say type 1, meaning your beta cells in the pancreas failed to secrete insulin or produces insufficient amount of insulin. Maybe, of course, this is classified as autoimmune disease already as of this time. So meaning, there is less insulin or no insulin at all production. Now, with this, without the presence of insulin, the glucose transporters cannot be activated, hence the glucose cannot be transported into the cell. So they will remain outside the cell. That's why there is what we call as increased blood sugar. There is poverty out of abundance. The cells will be starved, and yet there are more foods around, but cell cannot use them. Why? They cannot be taken in, passing through those glucose transporters. It could be because they are not activated. Or, also, in type 2 diabetes, say, you have produced sufficient insulin. However, because of this increasing insulin production due to high intake of carbohydrates and fatty acids. Remember, and there is what we call accumulation of these ketones. Now, the result is the insulin may bind to the receptor, but the receptor will not recognize the insulin anymore. It will become resistant to the insulin. And remember, the binding of this insulin and its specific receptor activates these glucose transporters to let the glucose get inside the cell for cellular activities. But since it will no longer be binding with its receptor, because the receptor resists with its insulin, then there is no glucose transport into the cell. And that's why there is what we call as starvation. Magutom ang cell. Even though your body contains lots of food for the cells, and yet this food cannot get inside. No? Now, what is not good also in ketone bodies class? No? Though they are used as fuel in most tissues and organs, formation occurs of these ketone bodies when the amount of acetyl-CoA produced is excessive, sobra. So meaning kung magsigig breakdown of fatty acids, sige lang breakdown, kaya nga naman, wala na carbohydrates, or say, na carbohydrates, pero dili kasulod. So ang resulta, magsigig breakdown, magniwang. Magsigig breakdown of fatty acid. So magkadaghan ang accumulation sa acetyl-CoA. So, excessive compared to the amount of amylochloric acid, take it into the, okay, so magkadaghan na. So, dili ni mao ang acetyl-CoA nga na-produce out of the breakdown of pyruvate. Kani, na-produce ni out of the breakdown of fatty acid. Now, kani siya, meaning, kay daghan man siya accumulation, so daghan siya o ketone bodies accumulation. Now, ang resulta karon, if the ketones are not used as fuel, now that will be accumulated in the kidneys, and that will result to ketonuria. Now, how do you know? How do you describe a person with ketonuria? Now, say, you smell a person who is dying because of hunger. It smells like he is drunk or she is drunk. That is because of ketone body accumulation. Ketones. Kaya magsige siya accumulate, kaya magsige mag-breakdown ng fatty acid. Kaya nga naman, dili man kasulod ang glucose.
Ketoacidosis.
Ha?
Ketoacidosis.
Mag-create na siya. Ketoacidosis. No? So, ang resulta, too much accumulation. And remember, anything in excess will be thrown out to the kidneys. So, maluya ng kidneys. So, ang resulta, you'll have kidney failure. Are you with me? Huh? So, those are the resulting actions. No? Okay. So, ultimately, there will be starvation. No? Starvation of your cells. Okay. Now, any question for fatty acid breakdown? How about this? For the breakdown of protein. Now, for protein breakdown, now since, say for example, your body, like when Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he ran out of carbohydrate supplies. So, the fatty acids, the glycerol were broken. The fatty acids, the glycerol were broken. In the liver, in the muscles, they were broken. Now, of course, there are also other molecules which are sources of energy. We have proteins as the source of energy. That's why when Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he said, "Men shall not live by bread alone." Because fatty acids can be used up, glycerol can be used up, amino acids can be used up as energy. Okay, so asan yung ikan? So we have here the amino, say when we ate the protein, now that when it reaches to the small intestine, it becomes amino acids. Then they would be transported to the, say, to the circulatory system, entering into the cells, and that will be incorporated in the amino acid pool of our cells. So I say an amino acid pool bali tanan all our amino acids there. And that's where the cell gets the amino acids for raw materials. Okay? Now, out of that amino acid pool, then it undergoes oxidative deamination or pwede po kani siya amino acid for the synthesis of protein. Kaya natong ginakaon. Say, amino acid pool, then there is what we call as anabolism. Are you with me? Or synthesis of proteins. Or it could be synthesis of this. Heme for hemoglobin production. For nucleotide production. For hormones. For neurotransmitter productions. That's the purpose of the amino acid pool. That's why in your diet, we should have proteins. Because that will be broken down, so they will be incorporated in the amino acid pool in the cellular level. So they would be used in the synthesis of proteins or used in the synthesis of these molecules. Or some will undergo deamination. This is another metabolic activity. When we say D means removal of amino group. Because remember, the amino acid contains the amino group and the carboxyl group. The amino group is toxic. When the amino acid is used up or metabolized, the toxic portion is the amino group must be removed. That's why there is what we call as deamination.